Eric, how
Hey, how
are
are
you?
you?
I'm
I'm
good.
doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I see we've got a little bit of echo going. We've got a little bit of a lag time.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, no, that's okay. That's the wonders of technology, right? I mean, you and I have only met each other through technology, and here we are now shooting a podcast together.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Isn't it great?
Yep, yep. One thing I like about podcasts, I have my own podcast, and I have these random people reaching out to me from all over the world saying, "Hey, Eric, it's awesome what you're doing." So it's kind of gratifying actually the way technology can be used.
Yeah. I don't know if you find this, but I people will come up to me, if I'm speaking at a conference or something, and we start talking like we've been friends forever.
Yeah,
Because they've heard the stories or they know me. They know me as much as they know me through the podcast, which is great. And I'm like, man, all these people are so nice.
yeah.
And then I don't know anything about them, and I feel bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I was interviewing the CEO of Swinnerton, which is a billion-dollar contractor here in the States. His name is Jeff Hoops, and we had a couple of really good chats. And I was connecting with this guy on LinkedIn, and he told me in his message, he said, "Eric, I'm working for Swinnerton specifically because of your interview with Jeff on the podcast," and that just blew me away.
No way. So he listened to that, and then when he went for his interview, he mentioned it, or
No, no, no. He listened to that, and then he reached out to them and said, "I want to work for you guys." It's an amazing thing.
yeah. There's nothing. There's probably never been a greater time for us to be in business.
Yeah, yeah, I
The
agree.
it's so much easier than it's ever been, and at times I suppose that makes it harder too because there's so much communication. We're going to talk today about communication. You're an expert on that. But there's so much communication, it can be hard to filter it and sort it. And the consistency of our message is probably what becomes the most important thing, or focus. Like your guy had, he just focused on Swinnerton and he got it.
Yeah, it's interesting that idea of communication, because in working with contractors since 2004, I've been convinced that all things being equal in terms of people's technical capabilities, it is their ability as leaders to communicate that will set apart one construction company from another. Because all construction is, once you've got the technical capabilities down, is a communication game.
Yeah, especially GCs, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's super light on the equipment, on the infrastructure side. It's really just mind share. And perhaps you and I see this the same, but somebody asked me to define a business once, and I said it's just a collection of systems that work.
Interesting. Interesting. So
Right?
then my perspective is that in order to have those systems that work, you have to have the people associated with those systems. And so you have your services and your products, you have your processes, and then
Yeah.
you have your people that drive both of those in order to generate the profitability that your business is looking for.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself because the people listening may not have ever met you or they might not listen to your podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll jump into this very interesting acronym for leadership that you've got.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've worked with contractors since 2004. I started selling an international leadership development program. My first customer was a construction contractor. They're still my client today in
Nice.
2019. And from the very beginning, working with construction companies, I've just really resonated with them because I love the fact that you can drive down the street as a contractor, you can point to something and you can say, "I built that."
Hmm.
So what contractors do has such a profound effect upon the communities in which they live. And they not only benefit the communities, but obviously the employees that work for them. And I love the fact that construction companies and leaders are, for the most part, real down to earth, but at the same time, extremely visionary and extremely hardworking. And it's been a privilege for many, many years to work with construction companies.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. The reason I get to work with business owners who have trades companies, construction companies, is because there's no BS.
Yeah, right on.
I've coached white collar companies before, but they talk a lot and they say no in the longest sentence you've ever heard. If
Yeah,
I suggest something, or if we're having a discussion with let's say a GC or even a plumbing, a contractor,
yep,
and something hits the table they don't like, they just go, "Yeah, you're full of it. That
yep,
won't work."
yeah,
And
straight
that's
up.
okay. Now we know, right? But
Yep.
if a white collar business like an insurance company or something else, they have these long conversations about, yeah, we'll look into the feasibility of that application, and Frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the word you put in front of me that got me interested was the word ear.
I know. I know.
E.A.R. What is that?
All right. So just grab your ear for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you spell ear?
I'm worried that this is a trick question, but
This
it's
is not a trick question. This is not a. I don't do trick questions. How do you spell ear?
E.A.R.
Okay, E.A.R. So as a leader of a construction company, whenever you want to remind yourself of the three messages that you must consistently communicate to the people who report to you, all you have to do is grab your ear and remember E.A.R. And the E stands for encouragement.
Yeah.
The A stands for accountability. And the R stands for recognition. Those are the three messages that you as a construction leader must consistently communicate to your folks.
Okay, so encouragement. I changed hands because I need to write now.
Right.
Encouragement, accountability,
Yep.
and recognition.
And
And just
recognition.
before we go too much further, Eric, for those
Yep.
of you listening who are driving, don't do the ear thing.
Yeah, right.
All of Eric's show notes. Well, Eric's obviously you can see that you can listen to the show on the podcast or find it on the website. We'll have show notes in there. What I do with my show notes, Eric, is I get it transcribed so somebody can read the whole thing.
Yep.
But you can go back and listen to it as well. And I'm sure we'll figure out how to get in touch with you through this show. But for those of you driving, keep your hands on the wheel and just imagine Eric and I on the video with each other holding our ears.
That's right. I always feel a little bit cheesy when I do that because, it's an acronym and all that kind of stuff, but it helps me to remember those messages that you have to really communicate. And the thing to keep in mind is when you think of encouragement, you need to think of the phrase, you can do it. And then when you think of accountability, you think of the phrase, did you do it?
Yeah.
And then when you think of the idea of recognition, you think of the phrase, you did it.
Yeah. That's good.
So again, and this is not rocket science. And that's one thing I always tell my clients is the things that I tell you, you've probably heard them before, but it's not really what you know. It's what you're using and applying in terms of your leadership.
Yeah.
But if you can focus in on those three messages, encouragement, accountability, and recognition, it's really going to enable you to have much more impact in your leadership.
Right. And you know what I like about this is you're not telling me how to talk to somebody. My talking style, my behavior, might be different than yours. And I might be, a disaster contractor who goes in after a flood. Well, that can be sometimes a command and control type of leadership.
Yep.
You go do this, you go do that, right? If you've
Yep.
got a bit of a longer thing, like you're doing hardscaping, you show up with plans, you lay them out on the table or on the hood of the truck, and then you say, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it. And you're on the site for a long time. So different leadership styles, it sounds like this works.
Yeah, no, it's really effective. And just, when you start off at the top with this idea of encouragement, the question I often ask my clients is, what do you need to do to earn the right to say to someone, you can do it? And that's where, as a leader, you have to make sure that you have equipped the folks who report to you with the knowledge and the skills and the capability to perform at a high level.
Right.
And so when you're going to encourage someone, you have to be able to break down for them what it means to perform at a high level. And so in order to do that, I encourage my clients, when they're working with their people, to sit someone down and ask them, what are the top 3 outcomes that you're responsible for in your position? And they make a note of those top 3 things. And then I ask them to pick their most important outcome. And once they've identified their most important outcome, so let's say I'm an estimator, the most important outcome that I have as an estimator is to win work. So then I encourage the leaders to ask the people who report to them, now, what are the most important tasks that lead to that outcome?
Right.
Because you cannot always control the outcome, but you can control your performance that leads to the outcome.
Yeah, the inputs, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so once they've identified the most important tasks, then I encourage them to have their people pick the most important task that leads to the most important outcome.
And focus on that thing.
Yeah, but not only focus on it, but then if I'm going to be able to say to someone, you can do it, I need to ask them, well, you see that task that you have to do that's going to lead to your outcome. What specifically can you do to improve your performance of that task?
Hmm.
And once they've come up with some ideas regarding that, I can help and support them in the execution of that improvement. And then I have earned the right to be able to look them in the eye and say, you can do it.
So that's pretty cool. What I think I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the first part of this leadership is setting up a conversation where I'm asking my person instead of telling them, and I'm getting them involved in the convo.
Yeah, and see that's absolutely essential, because in order for someone to be successful in any aspect of their responsibility, they have to understand what their role and responsibility is. And many times with construction companies, the reason why people fall short is because they either don't understand their role and responsibility, or they're avoiding embracing their role and responsibility.
Hmm.
And so if I can, as a leader, can sit down with the people who report to me, clearly delineate what their role and responsibility is, and work with them to help them achieve high performance in that role and responsibility, then I have earned the right to encourage them and say, you can do it.
Neat. So this conversation, how is it happening just ad hoc in the hallway, or am I having regular meetings with my people? Let's keep using the estimator as an example. It's a good one. A lot of people on my show will have estimators or be their own estimator. But how does this conversation happen if I'm looking at a week on a calendar?
Yeah, so this is a deep challenge for a lot of folks, because for a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't organize their time well. And number two, they have too many people reporting to them. Okay, so what I encourage my clients to do, especially the senior executives, is to identify their direct reports.
Yeah.
And commit to meeting with them on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis for a one-on-one conversation that is 30 to 60 minutes in length.
Yep.
And in that conversation, you can do the whole E.A.R framework in that conversation. You can give them encouragement, you can hold them accountable, and you can give them recognition.
You know, I wonder if you get the same feedback that I do, that some people listening to this might already be giving us, just you and I can't see them or hear them.
Yep.
Is you want me to have another meeting?
Yeah.
And my answer is, yep. But it's not a meeting just to meet. You talked about accountability, responsibility, the outline of the job.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's a very focused meeting, and the only meetings that are a waste of time are badly run or badly structured meetings. And I understand that we don't want to multiply meetings, but as a leader, really that's one of your main responsibilities, is to communicate with your people in a meaningful way. And if you want to be able to do that, you do have to spend time in their presence, one-on-one, talking to them.
Yeah. It's not just magic. It can't leave. I've had people say this to me, like, everything's in my head, Dom. I just can't get it out to my guys.
Yeah.
And then we start talking about, well, what do you need to get out to your crew? And meetings. And the first thing they say is, we don't want more meetings. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm talking about better, shorter meetings, not longer. Yes. Right.
And the key is here is when you're thinking about this E.A.R framework, the first thing that you want to do to implement it is to get out your org chart and just sketch your org chart out if you don't have an official one. But if you do, get your org chart out. And as you're going through the content of the podcast today, just make a note next to the person with the letter E for anyone who you think needs encouragement. Someone perhaps who you know has a lot of talent, but they're not performing at their highest possible level. And you may need to sit down with them and go over their role and responsibility and make sure that they're executing as they're capable of. Write a little E right next to their names, because that'll help to jog your memory about the kind of conversation you need to have with them.
Right. And then do I also go through that org chart or list of employees and say who needs accountability and who needs recognition?
That's exactly it. And that's the simplest way to use and apply this information is, again, to begin with your org chart, to sit down and say who needs encouragement, who needs accountability, who needs recognition. And you may find that you have one or two individuals that need all three of those messages.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you've just started, if you've never put systems in place for, it's hard being a leader because there's so many responsibilities that fall to us.
Yes.
Delegating is one of them.
Yep.
And so we've got to use these people in our company that way.
So let me talk about that for a little bit, because delegation is directly related to accountability. And in my experience, a lot of folks, they struggle, especially highly competent leaders who've built their businesses from the ground up, or they've been extremely successful. They struggle with delegation.
Hmm.
And there's three reasons I've seen that they struggle with delegation. The first
Sure.
one is that they just love being the hero. They're used to it. And so there's a problem that comes up and they go, here I come to save the day. And they love that rush that they get from solving problems. And their people love the fact that they're heroes and they themselves don't have to make those tough decisions.
They take the monkey on their back. The owner
Yes,
takes them.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's fundamental as a leader, if you're going to be able to maximize your your impact, to have that mindset shift from being, I need to be the hero, to I need to teach other people how to be the hero.
Awesome. So I got that. Number one is I love being a hero. What's number two?
Number two is perfectionism. And see, the problem is nobody can do it as well as you can. And it's true, they can't, because you're the expert and
Yes.
you've done it. You've proved yourself. But the question you've got to ask yourself is, are my people able to do it well enough? And if
Right.
they're able to do it well enough, then I should be able to release the task to them and then work with them on an ongoing basis to improve their skills, instead of holding on to a whole bunch of tasks that I'm unwilling to release because I'm a perfectionist.
Interesting. That's you must have been a fly on the wall in Tuesday's meeting.
Oh, Tuesday's meeting? What was that?
Well, just in my meeting on Tuesday. Well, this particular meeting, the guy is a great technician. He's awesome. He
Yep.
is the best. But he has expectations that the people on his team are going to work just as hard as he does.
Mm.
And it's not that they're not working hard. He doesn't like the way they do get to the same result.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we just had a conversation about the fact that if you're excellent at what you do, your rock star is probably going to be 80% of you. And then everybody else is below that.
Yeah.
Just change our expectations. So it's really saying the same thing as you.
Yep. Absolutely. And then the third one is that we just don't trust people. We don't trust people. And one of the reasons we don't trust people is because of our heroism and our perfectionism. We don't take time to train other people. So when they pop into our minds as someone who could potentially do the task, because I haven't trained them, I don't trust them, and therefore I don't delegate to them.
Let me ask you, where does the lack of systems come in this difficulty delegating? Do most companies that you run across have systems or processes?
Yeah, and so that's where I have a very simple system for delegation that I encourage people with.
Yeah.
So I'll just walk you through that real quick. The first thing you need to do is you need to choose what tasks you are willing to delegate.
Okay.
So one thing that I encourage senior leaders not to delegate, for example, is things like strategic planning at a high level.
Oh, yeah.
And also things like essential client relationships. So think about your top 5 clients. If you're the CEO of your construction company, you need to make sure that you maintain strong relationships with those folks, even if you don't see yourself as sort of a sales type person.
Yeah.
So the first thing is you need to choose what tasks you're willing to delegate. Step 2 is obviously to pick the best person to delegate the task to. Then what you need to do is give clear assignments and instructions. And if that means you need to put them in writing, that's fine. But you need to sit down with a person and make sure that you have been clear. And just because you're clear in your head doesn't mean that the other person is clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you need to set a definitive task completion date and a follow-up system. So, for instance, if the task that you're giving is a large task that's going to take weeks or months to execute, you need to make sure that you don't just give the task and then get back to them when it's due, but set up those intermediate steps where you can check in with them and see what progress they're making.
Yeah, I like, I'm a fan of that. I call them flow charts.
Yeah.
We just did one the other day with a company that has project managers, and these construction, obviously. So there's they're dealing with just the end of the estimating process all the way to the collection on the account process. And so the company that I was working with has just never done what's the project manager order of operations. Like what does a project manager do first and what do they do last?
Yeah.
And their first answer to me was, Dom, project managers should already know what to do. I agree. But it kind of goes back to your point here. I don't trust people or I don't delegate. And so kind of to your point about E.A.R, when you talked about encouragement, recognition, accountability and recognition, to keep you accountable, we have to have the same language, right?
Yes.
Same language. Yes. So we can't have the same language if we don't have the same steps in our mind.
Yes.
Like delivery, if I just say delivery to your company, does it mean delivery of product, delivery at our warehouse, delivery at our shop, delivery on customer site, installed and delivered, manufactured? What does delivery mean? When we have just a simple flow chart, whatever the steps are, we can then create names for those things. And it almost sounds hokey, but it's that simple. It's that simple, right?
Yep.
You know who proves that to us every day, Eric, is Starbucks.
Oh, yeah?
Dunkin'. Because they make us order using their language and their words, right? So if I go in and I order a triple tall upside down Americano, I can order that here. I can order that in Texas or in Brazil.
Yep.
Brazil's a country. Texas is a state. You know what I'm saying, right? I can
saying.
order it anywhere in the world using the same language. That's their process.
Anyways. No, it's fundamental. It's fundamental. And really the last thing you want to do is avoid reverse delegation. Reverse delegation. Well, what that is really is that you delegate a task to someone and they immediately start to shuck and jive and sort of move around and give you reasons why they can't. And they try and bat it back into your court. And you can't allow that because once you've delegated, then you have the right to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And when you encourage someone, you say to them, you can do it. When you hold them accountable, you ask them, did you do it? Did you do it? And if you've delegated effectively, then you have the right to hold them accountable.
Right.
And when you're having that accountability conversation, it's a very simple conversation. Did you do it? If not, why not? How can I help?
And that's when you lean in as the leader.
Yes.
Right? Because we're not setting them up for failure here. Delegation is helping them succeed, not setting them up to fail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And what's key when it comes to delegation, one last thing, delegation versus abdication, you need to remember 3 C's. And these are the 3 C's. Number 1, you've got to ask yourself, am I clear in what I'm delegating? Number 2, I have to ask, are they capable? Right? Yeah. And again, this is not rocket science, but it's like I have a bunch of kids, right? And I can delegate to my 5-year-old to do the dishes, but if there's a cast iron skillet, there ain't no way that kid is going to do the cast iron skillet. It's not happening. Now, my 14-year-old, he can do the cast iron skillet, but the 5-year-old, it's not happening.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And then not only am I clear and are they capable, then I have to ask, do they have the capacity? And what I mean by capacity is bandwidth.
Right.
And this is one of the challenges that leaders get into. They have a couple of stars and they heap a whole bunch of stuff on their stars. And their stars are like, yeah, give me more, give me more, give me more. And then boom, they burn out and they stress out and all that kind of stuff.
And they leave you and then you got to start again.
Yes.
That's the worst thing.
Yes. So am I clear? Are they capable? Do they have the capacity?
Nice. Well, I think most people that are listening to this are also surprised you figured out a way to get your kids to do the dishes.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you a funny story. This was a few years ago, and I said to my wife, it was like in November, I said to my wife, I am not doing the dishes anymore. And so I said, listen, January 1st, I'm not doing the dishes anymore. And I'm always encouraging her because, you know, like I said, we have 5 kids, right? So I figure, hey, we got 5 kids. They can do the dishes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so she had an opportunity to work with them to get them up to speed. And then January 1st, I stopped doing the dishes. Now I do a bunch of other stuff, but the dishes is something I don't do anymore.
I'll tell you what, I've got 2 kids and it's a constant dishwashing exercise in our house.
Yep.
At a certain point, you know, you wash the dishes, clean up the kitchen, and then you look around like, what happened here? Back we go again. You were doing about 3 rounds of dishes at night just before bedtime.
I know.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. That might be the big takeaway in today's call.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Eric, if people want to get in touch with you, you've obviously got a ton of knowledge here. If people want to get in touch with you and find out more about these systems, how do we find you?
Yeah, if you go to my website, ericanderton.com, and at ericanderton.com, you can find a lot about me in terms of the work that I do with my clients and what they have to say about that work. If you want a free resource that a lot of my clients use to really help them to focus in on what's important as a leader, you can go to ericanderton.com/CLD. So C as in cat, L as in Larry, D as in David. And there you can download the Construction Leaders Dashboard. And that is a dashboard that lays out 8 key areas that you need to focus on in order to be successful as a construction leader. And it's a very simple tool that you can use to enable you to focus on what is most important so that you can execute at the highest possible level.
Love it. Well, thank you for doing that, by the way. That's nice of you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Well, Eric, it's been great having you on here. I really appreciate your time. Certainly a wealth of knowledge.
Did you want to talk about recognition?
Oh, did we not get recognition?
Well, you see, that's the thing see, I'm holding you accountable here for what we're going to be going through here today, because once you've communicated that message of you can do it, then you've got to give them the recognition for after they've done it.
Man, I've already taken so many notes that I missed that we hadn't gotten the third acronym. I love it. No, let's hit it. Let's hit it.
So I'll tell you a funny story about recognition. And again, just going back to that idea of your org chart, think about people on your org chart that may need some accountability, maybe people that you haven't had those hard conversations with that you need to have, and put down an A next to their names. And then when it comes to recognition, it's really interesting. I worked many years ago for this killer entrepreneurial company. We're a small startup. And one year I got the award for the Marketer of the Year. And they gave me a plaque and everything like that. And the problem was I was the only person in the marketing department.
Hey, you nailed it.
I know, but you see, I learned something there about recognition. And the thing about recognition, in order for it to be impactful, you have to be able to be specific in your recognition. You have to be appropriately targeted to that person. And then you need to be consistent in terms of your recognition.
Uh-huh.
And you can't just sort of blindly recognize people. And one of the guys that I used to work for many years ago, he was very excellent. He would come up to me on a Friday afternoon, and he would say, "Hey, Eric, you know what you did last Wednesday when you had this conversation with that client? The way that you handled that really had a huge impact upon our relationship." And so he was very, very specific about the recognition he gave me. And I always remember that skill. That he took time to think about what I'd actually done and then recognized me for those actions.
Right. Interesting that also encourages you to do that again.
Yeah, it really does. And you always have to keep in mind also the type of recognition that someone wants. So, we have these, and right around now we're recording this around a holiday season, and this time when people get together and they have holiday functions and they recognize people. But have you ever thought that there's some people in your organization, they have no desire to stand up in front of anyone and get any kind of plaque? It just mortifies them.
Yeah.
Some people love it. They love the spotlight. Other people, they just want that quiet word and that real sense that you appreciate what you're doing for them.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. So recognition is important, and it doesn't matter what industry we're in. Sometimes I'll hear people that have a little bit too much crust on them, and they're like, "I don't need to recognize them. They're just doing their job."
Yeah. And to that, I wholeheartedly agree that if people are just doing their job, they don't need participation trophies. You give them a paycheck. You don't need to recognize people for just doing their job. You do need to recognize people, though, for going above and beyond.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that you're noticing that. But don't give out cheap recognition because it devalues it in your organization.
Exactly.
Withhold it only for high performance, not just for doing your job.
Yeah. It needs to mean something, or the whole thing means nothing.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right. I mean, here you were talking about the award that you received, and what happened when you went back and sat down at the table and everybody around you said, "You're the only guy in the marketing department"? I
know, it was a bit of a joke, actually. I think the guys who ran the company were good friends of mine, and so we had a joke about it afterwards. But it was really no big deal.
Fantastic. I've taken a ton of notes. I'm sure people listening are wondering, about all of this. So we've already mentioned that it's going to be in the show notes. We know how to catch you on the website, ericanderton.com.
Yep.
And then you said /CLD.
Yeah, CLD. That's a very simple little tool that you can get that'll be extremely helpful to you. You know what you can also do is just check out my podcast. It's Construction Genius.
Yeah.
And I get that title, by the way, from the Thomas Edison quote that genius is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. And so the purpose of the podcast is to give you that 1% inspiration that you combine with your perspiration on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Well, and running a podcast, as we both do, there's a lot of work that goes into this in the background.
Yeah, there is. But the work what I'm referring to with that construction genius is that the folks who listen to it, I think they're the geniuses. I'm not the genius.
Yeah.
They are. And my job is to give them the inspiration to add in with their 99% perspiration.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I say this to my friends when we talk about the podcast. They're like, well, who listens to the podcast anyway? I'm like, well, I maybe don't know them face to face, but I'll tell you what, they're the top in their industry. Yep. And they were like, well, how do you know that, Tom? I'm like, because they actively went out and said, I want to find out more. There's a million people out there that don't listen to these shows. But the handful that do, they're already on the right path. They're already doing the things they need to do. And I just love that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Eric, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate having you.
Dom, my pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day.